Welcome everybody to the policy committee meeting for November the 29th. We'll start with roll call. Ms. Lohman. Here. Mr. Burdell Williams.
Present.
Mr. Epps.
Present.
Okay, thank you. Next on the agenda is the approval of the October 25th, 2022 minutes.
Move to approve. Motion to approve.
Okay, Mr. Epps is first. Do I have a second? Second. Ms. Lohman is second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, those minutes are approved. We're going to start with old business, starting with policy 143, district issued Chromebooks. Ms. Jackson or
Yes,
Mr. Yasmin?
just want to, before we begin, just to say that reminder about us not doing the new business policies this evening. They will be rescheduled for a meeting in December due to the additional revisions for the special ed policy.
Great. Thank you for that reminder. And we'll post the new meeting date once we confirm that.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, so policy 143, sorry, district issued Chromebooks is up for repeal. It'll be merged into policy 816.
Okay, and policy 816 is acceptable use of technology.
Correct.
Is next on the agenda. Any concerns about repealing policy 143? Okay, seeing none, then this will be placed on the agenda for the legislative meeting next week for repeal. Next is policy AR 816, acceptable use of technology.
Yes, so this is the acceptable use of technology policy. The committee did see this one last month. There were a couple changes that the committee requested from at the meeting last month. Those changes have been incorporated. And one thing that I wanted to point out for the group, and Mr. Barone or Dr. Scriven may want to chime in here, but I think there was some additional conversation following the meeting last month, and it was decided that administration would like to recommend to the board not charging a fee for like use of a device and being issued a device. So the policy language was tweaked just a little bit. The policy permits a fee to be imposed, but doesn't require one, and simply indicates that if a fee is approved by the board and implemented, it talks about procedures in the administrative regulation for how families can seek either a reduced or waived fee in the event that that fee presents a financial hardship. And so that there was a little bit of tweaking in the language to just accompany or accomplish what I just indicated. But again, the fees that we would be talking about are the $30 fee per child, $60 maximum, but the administration is not currently recommending in future years, starting with next school year, implementing that fee. But we did think it was helpful to leave the discretion to do that and the procedure for requesting a hardship in the documents themselves.
Thank you, Mr. Diazio, for that explanation. I think that really does incorporate some of the comments that were made at the last policy committee meeting related to charging fees. Any board comments?
I do appreciate the revisions and also just really value the phrase to ensure that no student is denied access. I think that just makes a very strong, clear point about our position. And so that, as a community member, to be able to reference that in any form or fashion or any, similar statement, but I think that, again, provides some very firm language that can't quite be translated in a way that isn't clear. So I appreciate that.
Thank you. Any other board comments? Okay, seeing none. Any community comments? Are there any members from the community participating?
No.
No. I didn't see any. Yeah.
Nope.
Okay. Alrighty, seeing none, the policy in AR 816, acceptable use of technology, will be placed on the agenda for the legislative meeting for adoption. And again, Mr. Diazio, thank you for incorporating the language
Sure.
that you did. That really accurately reflects the comments of the board members last time. Okay, next on the agenda is policy 824, GPS on district vehicles, and it's being posted or recommended for repeal.
Yes, so this is a repeal that the committee saw last month that would just proceed to a second reading.
Okay, and no changes have been made since the last meeting.
Correct.
Okay. Any board comments? And Mr. Diazio, can you just remind us, with repeal of this policy, what is it replaced with, or didn't need to be replaced at all?
So it's not necessarily being replaced with anything, but the school district has a contract with the outside vendor, and there are GPS systems on those vehicles, and that's required by contract. Frankly, much more than just GPS devices is required. My sense is that this policy was implemented, 9-10 years ago when GPS was probably the new technology. And we're certainly in a much different environment now. Our contract with Cheltenham Transportation requires many things. It requires that we be able to communicate with the buses in real time. There's tracking devices on the vehicles. There are requirements about how old the vehicles can be, how often they undergo maintenance, what type of fuel they need to use. All of those types of things are memorialized in a contract with our provider.
Okay. Thank you for that reminder.
Sure. Good
Alrighty,
question.
so seeing no changes, this will also be posted for adoption, well, for repeal at the legislative meeting. Okay, next on the agenda is policy in AR 808, food services.
Yes, so this policy was discussed last month. There was just some minor changes to the policy that the committee saw last month. Nothing significant has changed since the last meeting. In fact, I don't think any changes were made to this one since the last meeting.
Thank you. Any board comments on policy in AR 808? Some community members have just stepped in, so I'll wait a second until you sign in to see if you may have any comments or questions about this particular policy.
There's also a copy of the agenda on the table as well.
Okay, thank you very much. And we're on number 6 on the agenda, policy in AR 808, food services. And this is a policy that we reviewed last month. There have been no substantive changes since the last meeting. So we're going to send it out to the community to see if they have any questions about this particular policy. Okay, thank you. Sure. Alrighty, seeing none, then this policy in AR will be posted for adoption at the legislative meeting this month. Okay, next on the agenda is policy in AR 259, homeless students.
Yes, so the changes to this policy since the last meeting, where we updated some terminology to replace the outdated term of homeless students with students experiencing homelessness. And thank you to Ms. Lohman for catching that. That was a good catch there. I don't think there was anything additional. Let me just scroll. Yeah, that was it. That was the only change since last month. So this is the district's policy for students experiencing homelessness. And at a future meeting, probably in early 2023, the board can expect to see a proposed new policy probably titled something along the lines of ensuring stability for or students experiencing educational instability. There's some new provisions of the law that apply to homeless students, but they also apply more broadly to other students other than those that are just experiencing homelessness. It could be a student that is permanently housed but has moved around between different school systems, students that are in foster care. So we'll be bringing a policy forward to the board for consideration that will comply with all of the provisions of the new state law that was just recently implemented within the last year or so.
And Mr. Diazio, are you thinking that we would combine what's currently the content of this particular policy with an expanded policy that addresses making sure that students don't experience educational kind of inequities?
So I think we can tease that out a little bit as we toss around the language. My sense is that it probably makes more sense to make them standalone policies. And the reason I say that is because I would be hesitant to just merge it with the students experiencing homelessness policy, because the scope of its Act 1 is the new law, not to be confused with the Act 1 that relates to taxes, but the scope is more broad than just students experiencing homelessness. So I actually think it helps conceptually to have it in a separate policy so that it doesn't just get lost in a policy on students experiencing homelessness. But there definitely will be similarities and similar themes, and we'll definitely want to cross-reference the policies when the new one is proposed. And if we get to a point where it looks like maybe some sort of combined policy is appropriate, we'll certainly bring 259 back to the committee with that recommendation.
Great, thank you. Any board comments or questions regarding policy in AR 259? And Ms. Lohman, thank you very much for that recommended change to title of the policy.
You're welcome, sure. And I would just say, Mr. Diazio, I could agree with our approach for now, keeping those two things separate, because McKinney-Vento also has some broader provisions that wouldn't apply to some of the students, I think, who would be covered under the new Act 1. So
I agree with you. Correct.
Okay, any community comments regarding policy in AR 259? We're going to be renaming the students experiencing homelessness. Seeing none, in this policy will be posted for adoption at the next legislative meeting on December the 13th. Next on the agenda is policy in AR 257, suicide prevention and self-harming behavior.
Yes, so I don't believe there were any changes to this policy since the last committee meeting. This is the policy that is required by Act 71 of 2014 and relates to the efforts that the district makes to assist students that are engaging in high risk or self-harming behavior, and measures to prevent suicide and related types behavior. And I do see that Ms. Keene is on the call here, so if there are any questions, I'm sure she can certainly assist as well.
Any board questions regarding policy in AR 257? Seeing none, any community concerns about policy in AR 257? Seeing none, and this will also be posted for adoption at the December 13th legislative meeting. And the last item on our agenda is policy 112, school counseling.
And no changes to this one since last month. We listed 112 for this group, this meeting last month, because we grouped some student services policies together. So the students experiencing homelessness, the suicide prevention, and the school counseling policies all sort of went together. And this one was coming up on, 8 years since it was last reviewed. And believe it or not, 8 years in the Cheltenham manual is actually an old policy today. A couple years ago, that wasn't the case, but the committee has been very busy, and most of our policies are less than 5 years since the last review date. So looking at this one with a 7-year ago date, we just decided it was an opportunity to take a look.
Well, that's thanks to you, Ms. Jackson, Dr. Scriven, and your staff to really put those policies before the board for review. And we've gone through quite a few, so it's great to be in that position. So thank you. Well, I have nothing to do soon. Any board questions regarding policy 112? Any questions from the community regarding policy 112, school counseling?
And Mrs. Haywood, if there were any questions from the community members that came in after the start on any of the first items on the agenda, I'm happy to assist with any questions that might exist.
Okay. So before you came in, we went through items 1 through 5 under old business. We post that on the screen, but they're also posted as draft documents in Google Docs. And so if you have any questions regarding any of those policies, 3 through 5, just let us know. 2 of them are up for review.
Just one quick question for the policy 824.
Did you just state your name?
I'm sorry, I'm Tara Knox, Sullivan.
Mhm.
For policy 824, GPS on the district vehicle. The bus transportation, that's not considered a district vehicle, the school buses, are they considered district vehicles or? Okay. Can you just kind of lightly go over with that policy, whatever covers on that policy?
So I'm going to probably defer to Mr. Diazio, but quickly, we're putting this up for review because we have a contract out with City of Cheltenham Trans
Okay.
for our school buses and other small vehicles. And so they already have GPS and other devices on their trucks and buses that we avail ourselves of. So there's really no need to currently have a GPS policy in place.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
All right, Mr. Diazio, did you want to add anything?
Yes, that's correct. And just to say one additional thing, just for purposes of clarity, the fact that we are repealing this policy does not mean that the vehicles will not have GPS systems included. That is not the case. All of the vehicles do have that software included.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, earlier we indicated when we started the meeting that what was originally listed as new business were several special ed policies, but because of changes to those policies that were made fairly recently, we've pulled those from the agenda for this evening, and we'll revisit those at our next policy committee meeting, which is the date will be determined, and we'll make sure we post that on the website. Okay. Not seeing anything else on the agenda? Oh, Dr. Scriven?
Yeah, just want to take one point of privilege, something that is not reflected in today's policy committee, but we do have parents who are advocates and extremely interested in us positioning ourselves to enhance Cheltenham High School in the athletic fields. There are 2 policies that are in question. One has recently been revised. It's policy 702, and which is focused around donations to the district, and policy 711 that was just revisited on June 14th, 2022. 702 was last revised on August 9th, 2022. There were some concerns, and I'm gonna yield the floor to our parent constituent with some of the questions that they had, only for us to potentially revisit those policies if we think that there's some barriers as we look at reaching out to potential donors and making sure that there's no implications around naming rights or anything from that perspective. So this is more for information to be revisited at a later policy committee meeting, if so desired by the board to do so. So I'm gonna yield the floor at this time.
Michael Brooks, parent of students and live in Elkins Park. The general consensus in the thought process was ensuring that when, potential donors come and are availing themselves of large sums to be determined by the board, as far as that, the naming rights would not be an issue when it comes to them making a donation and not making a donation. So, and hopefully, not knowing specifically how the policy is written, I don't know how factual it is, but in the past, the understanding was naming rights was an issue that was a blockade when it came to getting funding. And last week I was kind of inspired by Bucks County Examiner running their newspapers and seeing the anonymous $1 million donations and things of that sort. So I don't want us to have roadblocks that will block potential donors and restrict them from wanting to enhance the district. So I just, wanted to kind of put that out there.
Thank you for that comment. And I know when we were looking at the naming rights policy just a couple of years ago, part of the framework was also looking at the naming rights as it related to products that we may not want to endorse.
Okay.
And so that might have been tobacco products or things that were kind of against our mission and vision. So that was the construct in which we were looking at the naming right restrictions generally. But again, it's an opportunity for us to revisit that. If, the administration, feels at a time that's appropriate to look at that. But thank you very much for bringing those concerns to our attention.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi, Sarah Knox from Wincote again. I'm son at Shelton High School. In terms of the naming rights, I know that we were just recently sponsored by Adidas for our uniforms for the high school. And I'm not sure, so I don't know if this falls under, if that falls under the naming rights because this is a company and the students are working, no, it doesn't, okay. All right, that was my question.
So, okay. Every question is a good question.
Thank you. I just wanted to make sure if that falls under that, like, they're clearly wearing this logo, so, okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah. Any board questions, comments? Okay, so thank you for bringing that information to our attention. Collectively, we'll look at that and administration will determine whether that will come back to the board for further review. Okay, again, I don't think that concludes what's on our agenda. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Mr. Bernard Williams is first. Do I have a second?
Second.
Ms. Loman, second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, meeting is adjourned.
Have a good.